Hey guys, in this week of Outside the Boards, I'm going to be discussing USHL tryout process and kind of going along of how important it is to understand this stuff. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding how you make the USHL, how you even try out for these teams. This is one of many segments. I think I'm going to go through the NA, the North American League next, and kind of go through Tier 3 and then talk about the trickle down effect as well in some upcoming videos. So there's some really good stuff coming up. And also, I'm going to have my very first guest on Outside the Boards very soon. His name is Pat McCadden. He's my business partner. He owns Elite Performance Hockey, but he is also my former college coach and an assistant coach at the Green Bay Gamblers in the USHL. So he and I are going to sit down and I'm going to ask him some tough questions about the USHL, how you get into this league, and how difficult it can be to stay in this league and play and perform in this league. So my goal for today is for parents and players to really understand how hard it is to make the USHL. And I don't want to scare anybody, but it's extremely difficult and it's a difficult process. And I want to educate people on what a tender is, how the draft works, what it means to be drafted, how main camp works, training camp, so all that kind of stuff. So in my junior hockey explained video, if you haven't seen it, please go watch it because it explains what all these leagues are. But just a refresher here, the junior tier system in the US, the USHL is the top league in the country, period, hands down. And that's why we're talking about it first. Only 16 teams, not a lot of players playing in this league, very elite. The very first way that you can make the USHL is to sign a tender. A tender is a contract showing your intentions for playing for a team in this league the following year. Right now it is, let's go with this past season. Some point during that season, 21-22 season, a USHL team could contact you and offer you a tender, which means that they want you to play for them the following season. A couple things to understand here. Tenders do not happen often in the USHL. It happens more often in the North American League, which you'll see in a different video. But in the USHL, tenders do not happen very often because if a USHL team uses their tender, you have to give up a draft pick, and it has to be your first or second round pick. So if you use one tender, you give up your very first draft pick. If you use two tenders, you lose your second round draft pick as well. So it's a pretty big hit. The other reason tenders aren't used very often is because players are required by the league to play in a certain number of games if you are tendered. This is where it differs from the NA, and this is again why they're not used as much in the USHL. This is actually the only way that you'll be guaranteed games. Now, the USHL draft is kind of the next phase. The draft occurs in May, and it's a very similar setup to any type of draft, NFL, NHL, whatever it is. There's going to be two phases. There's phase one, which is called the futures draft. And this is for players that are about 16 years old. Of May of 2022, the birth year that was eligible for the futures draft was 2006. Now, what that means, if you're 2006 and you were drafted as a future, is that you are going to go to main camp and you are going to play in front of the coaches and the staff and the scouts of that team that you're drafted by. They are going to protect you for the following year, and that means other teams cannot sign you or tender you or draft you following year. Now, phase two is the big one. Phase two is the draft for any eligible player, which means, under 21 years old, not just in the country, but in the world. Now, within the phase two draft, each team gets to protect 45 players total. So depending on future draft picks, those are protected players. Depending on tenders, those are protected players. Depending on future draft picks from previous years or even draft players from last year, they're protected as well. So each team, their draft number is going to change. One thing that's really important here, and again, we'll get clarification on this when I talk to Pat McCadden, but to my knowledge, the 45 player protected list does not include players that played for this USHL team the prior year. Now, after this draft, later in the summer, typically June or July, there is main camp. Now, you've probably heard of main camps before. This is where kids get emails, parents get emails. If you play in some sort of fall league, or if a lot of AAA players, if you play in a fall league or a AAA league, you will get invitations from USHL main camps. In a USHL main camp, typically it is invite only, but they are going to invite a lot of players. And this is where, you kind of get mass emails sent around, and a lot of players will Parents and players will get really excited. Oh, I don't really know what this means. Oh, it's it's the USHL. It's a big opportunity. Yes, but we need to take it with a little bit of grain of salt because teams use main camps as a little bit of a cash grab. That's just the truth. Just a way for them to be able to pay for a lot of their expenses. I mean, in the USHL, everything's free, so they got to pay for billets. They got to pay for equipment. They travel. They have so much stuff they got to pay for, and they use this big camp as a way to fund a lot of these things. That's what happens, and that's why you see 200 kids attend a USHL main camp. It is an opportunity, and again, we'll talk to Pat McCadden about this. It is still an opportunity to play in front of USHL coaches, staff members, and scouts. So it still is a great opportunity, but remember that 45 players are already protected here. At this main camp, you're guaranteed roughly 3 games. Now, after 3 games, they'll make first round of cuts. They'll send players home, and then you'll play a couple more games. Then they'll do cuts. Then they'll send players home. Then they'll typically have their all-star game and young gun game. Now, I don't have the young gun game on this slide, but the young gun game is for those 16, 17-year-old players. You're basically not going to be playing on the team that year, but they want to see the best of those ages. If you're a really young player, you still are eligible to play in the all-star game. And if you're a 16-year-old making the all-star game, that means that you're a pretty phenomenal 16-year-old. And it does happen. The all-star game is really where they're going to pick all the players that are going to make it to training camp. And that's where that final team will be set, is at training camp. So remember, there's 200 kids attending this main camp. 45 players are going to the main camp that are already protected, whether it's a draft, tender, futures, which means the team already has a lot of interest. Plus, there's returning players that are probably going to be going to main camp as well. And the returners are guaranteed to get to training camp, basically. Now we get to training camp. From main camp to September 1st, that USHL roster is brought down to 30 players. So you go from 200 with 45 of them protected or whatever, plus returners, bang, cut down to 30. So if you're protected, even if you're drafted, does not mean you're getting to training camp. Tender, you will make it to training camp because you will be playing a couple games, guaranteed. September 20th, now they're down to 25. Getting on time, going even in more depth than that, how much harder it is. The USHL roster must carry 3 players that are under the age of 18. The roster must have 2 goaltenders. The roster cannot carry more than 5 20-year-olds. Okay, so they want to keep the league young so they can develop them, and they cannot carry more than 6 import players. 2 Canadian players do not need to count as imports, but import players are huge because here's the truth. I almost guarantee you, and Patty McCadden can attest to this when we talk to him, that every USHL team will use those 6 imports. That import rule has gone up. Originally, a long time ago, it was like 2 players, and then went up to 4 players. Now it's 6 players from other countries are allowed to play in the USHL, which means if you're an American-born player, your odds are getting slimmer and slimmer to make in this league. And you have to be great, and you have to be great during camp, during training camp. You have to really prove yourself. So it's very difficult to make this league. This is where I just wanted to get this information out to parents and players, how important it is not to go in thinking that you have something or if you earned something. You have not earned anything yet. You got to go through this process, and you got to work, and you got to prove who you are as a person and as a player. Thanks for watching Outside the Board. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is a really important one. Please like and subscribe my page. See you next time. Thank you for watching Outside the Boards with me, Jacob at North End Hockey. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe to our YouTube page or follow us on Instagram to see more videos like this one. If interested in learning more about North End Hockey, check out our website, northendhockey.com. Thanks for watching.